Welcome to episode 10 of Ping, a Firewalls.com podcast, a bi-weekly look at cybersecurity, including top products, the latest trends, news, expert tips, and interviews with top security industry company representatives. I'm Kevin Baxter, and I'm joined by my Firewalls.com colleague, Andrew Harmon.
Happy 2020.
Same to you, Andrew, as we dive into a different featured topic each episode. New episodes of the podcast come out every other Wednesday, so subscribe or follow on your favorite podcasting platform to get the latest one. And feel free to leave a comment or email us at podcast@firewalls.com with feedback or questions. And of course, the whole bi-weekly every other Wednesday thing did get a bit interrupted by the whole holiday season thing and the fact that Christmas and New Year's Day both decided to fall on Wednesdays this time through. So we may have stretched every other to every other week between our last episode and this one, but we are back on schedule now. So happy New Year to you all. No more looking back. Let's look forward to the first year of the 20s with our featured topic for this episode.
For the first edition of Ping in 2020, we thought we'd take a look into the future, wrapping up some of the cybersecurity predictions and rising trends for the new year, 20 of them in fact. That seemed like an appropriate number for some reason that we can't quite put our finger on. And just to keep you and us on our toes, as part of our list, we'll be mixing in a few other predictions that may be somewhat less likely to come up in the next year.
So Andrew and I will go back and forth in rapid fire format to go through our top 20, compiled with the help of some top security industry experts. Then we'll talk about each prediction, where it's coming from and what it means. We'll laugh, we'll cry, we'll make you think. It'll be a grand, if a little bit scary, time. Let's jump into the list. Andrew, what's number one?
Number one, a quarter of all breaches will happen outside the perimeter in 2020.
Number two, AI will continue to evolve to better stop attacks.
Number three, everybody should be on the lookout for the new mobile trend, fleeceware.
Number four, securing all attack surfaces will be a vital challenge to meet.
Especially bred apes and other animals will carry out daily chores in the home.
Interesting. Number five. Number six, watch out for Wi-Fi creeping drones.
Number seven, attacking the backups will become routine.
Number eight, 5G will be a perfect incubator for swarm-based attacks.
Number nine, our voter registration systems will be targeted. Again.
Sounds nice. Number 10 will be vacationing on the moon.
Number 11, smishing.
Number 12, telepathy and teleportation will be possible by 2020 and commonplace by 2040.
Can't wait. Number 13, remote desktop protocol is a ripe new target.
Number 14, technology allows systems to predict cyber attacks.
Number 15, billions of tiny nanobots in the digestive tract and bloodstream could intelligently extract the precise nutrients required, eliminating food consumption.
I don't know if I like that one. Number 16, mid-sized companies will make MFA standard.
Everybody get your Masters of Fine Arts. Number 17, cloud incidents continue due to human error.
Number 18, organizational security needs a paradigm shift.
Number 19, C, X, and Q will be removed from the alphabet as they're extraneous, unnecessary letters.
Let's see. Oh, that will affect me. I don't know if I like that. And number 20 is GDPR coming to the US.
It's already in California, something similar, I believe.
That's very true. So that was our top 20. A few of them maybe sounded a little bit wackier than some of the others.
That's true. Telepathy and teleportation be possible by 2020. They've got a year to figure that out.
Yeah, less than a year, as my telepathic mind is telling me right now. But that was actually a more recent prediction. Some of these were predictions done many years ago. Our C, X, and Q prediction of having them being removed from the alphabet was actually from over 100 years ago. So you could give
Ladies' Home Journal. I understand the X and the Q, but what's their problem with C?
Yeah, I don't know. C seems pretty ubiquitous.
Yeah, maybe they want to roll it into an S and a K and, quit with the splitsies.
And I did look through the person's name and everything who predicted this. He was with the Smithsonian Institute, an engineer. None of those letters appeared in his name, so at least he felt okay about convenient. That. John Elfrith Watkins Jr.
I'd like to talk about number 11, smishing, which we very briefly flew past there. That's sort of a mashup of SMS and phishing. So phishing scams taking place through your text messages.
Yeah, that's a prediction from Experian, actually, for the coming year. And, it makes sense. I think I've experienced a couple of these here and there. They're not super common.
Yeah, so you'd be looking for somebody sending you a text with a link, asking for any sort of unnecessary personal card information, anything like that. Pretty much the same pattern as an email phishing scam, but through your phone.
Yeah, it's still pretty easy for attackers to execute something like this too on a sort of mass scale. So
yeah, and it'll likely be pretty efficient in the upfront area where people aren't quite as aware of what's happening. So let's get that education piece moving.
Yeah, it pays to not only pay attention to your email, but also to your text messages for this. And actually, the Experian prediction also mentioned the fact that this is an election year. There will be more lists of phone numbers out there than ever before. And a lot of people will potentially, donate to a campaign or something, or want to volunteer for a campaign and be willing to expect that they're getting some sort of text related to that. So got to be a little extra careful on that.
Double check your donation links.
And since this piece talked about the election year, it might be good to jump into the WatchGuard prediction that voter registration systems will be targeted during the 2020 elections.
Is this a prediction or a reminder?
Well, it's a little bit of both because, they take a little bit different tact by talking about the registration systems as opposed to the other methods of election manipulation. Finagling is a good word. That have already been documented to have occurred. So rather than just the misinformation on social media and the breaches that we've heard about being investigated, at least in state systems, this is actually talking about specifically registration, something that they have already started to probe, according to WatchGuard, in the 2016 election, but suspecting that they may be a little bit emboldened by their success from 2016 and go harder after those voter registration systems to make it harder for legitimate voters to submit their votes and, again, call into question the validity of voter counts.
Right. And that's obviously a very large, valuable data set to have if you are looking to manipulate anything in the election system. So if I remember correctly, in 2016, over half of the states had this exact same data probed. But I assume it'll be emboldened in 2020.
Yeah. And I mean, it's that double-edged sword of everything being computerized. There are ways for people to get at data that they could not have gotten at before. But if you get into the voter registration systems, then you can have a pretty major impact on the election. Maybe just on election day, people's registrations coming into question. If one party gets some extra help on whatever hacking scheme occurs, then you can really mess with the results of an election, maybe preventing a chunk of people registered under the other party from even being able to vote. So there are a lot of manipulation tactics here that are even more direct than the fake news that was spread around 2016.
Is there any you stuck out to you?
So that was definitely one. And I think, in general, the overall election stuff is certainly something to watch for in 2020. But another new technology that's getting more and more traction and is going to continue to be implemented more and more is 5G. So certainly a good thing in many ways, but we've talked a little bit, I think, about this already, that security is going to be a question mark when it comes to 5G. So Fortinet in its 2020 predictions mentions as 5G adoption becomes more widespread, it'll be the perfect incubator for swarm-based attacks. So the definition that they use for swarm-based attacks is basically intelligent swarms of customizable bots that are grouped by a specific attack function, and they can share and learn from each other in real time. So kind of a smarter botnet.
Yeah. And operating at 5G speeds, basically anytime technology grows more advanced or better, then so does the ability to attack it. So you could have attackers potentially launching attacks at speeds that are faster than your current system could match. So it makes it a little bit scary.
Yeah, it's always that sort of push and pull catch up of security and the ability to bypass that security. And sometimes the hackers are ahead, sometimes the security is ahead, but there's a definite concern here that the security will not be ahead of the game on 5G and that there will be some opportunities for some major attacks.
Yeah, and that also will probably see some opportunities for new products and services focused on DDoS protection, getting rid of bot swarm, stuff like that. So I'm sure that will become a hot topic as 5G grows larger and larger.
What was another one that jumped out at you?
Well, while we're on the topic of swarms, let's talk about drones. We should watch out for creeping Wi-Fi drones. According to Experian, the idea being that a drone would be able to insert itself next to an open Wi-Fi access point and target public data on a public Wi-Fi server that way.
This is taking it to another level. We've heard of, hackers maybe just parking in a van in an area that...
I'm not 100% sure why the drone is necessary, but maybe it's hard to reach public Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it's a little bit different methodology, but maybe it's instead of having to leave the house and get to a place that has public Wi-Fi, you can just launch a drone from your backyard or from your balcony if you have an apartment in a city and maybe you aren't quite in that public Wi-Fi zone, but you can get there without having to leave and have all your equipment set up right there. And you don't have to have sort of a mobile situation to get into it.
I actually heard a story on my way into work this morning about a town in Colorado that's had several sightings of drones flying just overhead. They're talking, multiple sightings from not just residents, but the police department. They've checked with surrounding Air Force bases. Can't really figure out what these drones are for. So maybe this has something to do with it. There's a hacker scan in the neighborhood.
Yeah, it very well could be. Drones are not that expensive and very easy to get. So people are always looking for other ways to
utilize them for no good.
And what's the easiest way to get into something like that? So I think that's where it may take precedence over vehicles and stuff like that. If you can just sit in your house and launch your drone and do it that way.
Don't even have to put your pants on to find an exposed network.
Another one that I thought was interesting was from Sophos's 2020 threat report, fleeceware. It's a term I had not heard before. It has to do with mobile apps specifically. So basically, they're out there right now, but continuing to be a threat that could continue to grow. They've named these apps fleeceware because they exist solely to fleece customers out of a very large amount of money. So they are apps that give you some kind of a free service initially when you download the apps, but they do collect your credit card information at the start of what's termed as sort of a free trial period, and then automatically charge you whatever, upwards of potentially $100 or more for an app that has a function that you probably don't really need to pay for.
So it's like the Columbia House of new threats. They want you to give them your credit card up front, and then they will continue charging you even after the usefulness has run out.
Well, I mean, some people still get the DVDs.
Some people still, are they still a company?
I think they do still exist,
Okay, well, I'm sorry to insult you, Columbia House.
But regardless, it's something that's a little bit scary because plenty of people do free trials and do have to give their credit card information. But you really need to look for apps that, especially the services that are listed here as a couple that they note, barcode scanners. There are a gazillion free barcode scanner apps that are not going to collect any information from you. Well, any credit card information. I can't vouch for the rest of the information, but you won't have to pay them for using the app at all. So just look for one of those.
So sort of like the old Nigerian email scams. It's looking for someone that's a little bit more gullible than the general public.
And so the additional danger in this is not only that you give your credit card information and don't cancel in time, but you may think, all right, I've used the app for my 14-day free trial. I'll just delete it and we're good to go. But if you don't actually take whatever physical method to cancel that is required by the particular app, they'll still charge you. So you can delete the app, but you actually need to do whatever it takes to cancel it. And a lot of these will not be simply, clicking a button to cancel your subscription. You may need to jump through a few hoops to get that cancellation put through. So that's something else you have to think about when you're dealing with one of these apps.
So in 1964, the Rand Corporation predicted that specifically bred apes and other animals will carry out daily chores in the house. How is your cleaning ape?
Still being trained.
Okay.
Hopefully by the end of the year, we'll make that prediction come true. That was an interesting one. And, it kind of jumped off of the whole robot era of predictions that
the smart house where everything will be taken care of for you.
And we're certainly part of the way there in many ways, but robotics has not taken off quite in the same way that a lot of people thought it would back in the day. Certainly, we've seen robotics being used in manufacturing now and in a number of ways, but you still don't really see much in the way of cleaning robots or cooking robots or anything like that. In any case, this particular prediction was related to that, thinking that maybe people who couldn't afford a cleaning robot could maybe just train an animal to do it instead.
Much cheaper cleaning cat.
Yeah. I don't think my cat would really be interested in doing much cleaning either. So making messes, maybe, not so much cleaning. Another one that came up, interesting from WatchGuard, talking about when I mentioned MFA, just to expand on that a little bit more. That's multi-factor authentication. So they predict that it'll become more and more of a standard for mid-sized companies. There have been issues with some smaller companies than the big enterprises with just implementation for that practicality wise. Mm-hmm. But there are new advances there that have made it easier to do. So specifically, WatchGuard notes 3 things that they talk about. First, you have MFA solutions have become simpler with cloud-only options. Mobile phones have removed the expensive requirement of hardware tokens, which were often cost prohibitive for mid-market companies. And finally, the deluge of password problems, as they say, has proven the absolute requirement for a better authentication solution. So you need it, basically.
And it works. It works very well. It blocks something like 99% of account takeover attempts. It's really not that hard to set up. It's a little bit of an upfront cost, but I think it's worth it.
It's one of the simpler security measures that you can take, really, and it will really be pretty effective in the same way. And, people sometimes get annoyed having to do an extra step when they're signing in.
Change is always resisted, but it's slowly shifting.
But yeah, you get used to it. If it's something that you require at your workplace, then people will do it.
Yep. Once it becomes monotonous to you, you won't even notice anymore.
Right.
So I'd like to bring up number 14, discussing, this is Fortinet, discussing the possibility of a technology which would allow cyber attacks to be predicted before they even happen. I know we tried this with earthquakes. It'd be pretty neat to do it with cyber attacks. So the idea here being relying on machine learning and large data sets to identify patterns and see, when, where, and exactly how these attacks are happening and see if we can predict them before the attacker has even conceived of it.
Right. And Fortinet had a couple of predictions related to artificial intelligence. So basically, all of that background information that you mentioned would then feed into an AI system that would do the predicting. And not only predicting that an attack will occur, but even who would be the most likely culprit for the attack. So if you can get that information, that's like a Minority Report situation.
Yeah, somebody sends you an email. You will be attacked tomorrow. Shut down your network from 12 to 12:30 in the afternoon.
Or we send Tom Cruise to go arrest the people who are about to attack.
That's true. You guys have not made the crime yet, but you have considered it.
And so just to continue on the AI theme that Fortinet had in its predictions, They're also predicting that we're getting to that point in the AI evolution that it'll allow organizations to combat attacks as if it was sort of an immune system. An adaptive immune system is what they call it. So sort of becoming like the white blood cells of your network.
Creating antibodies on the fly.
So that's an interesting descriptor and an interesting thought to be able to have that technology on your side that really does whatever it can to keep your system healthy.
Yeah, I imagine as AI continues to evolve in the 20s here, cybersecurity companies are definitely embracing it and starting to find some very creative uses for it. So I imagine we are going to be moving into a place where we are trying to make these predictions and we are trying to have custom solutions made at the moment of attack that can actually work in time.
The 20s. That's going to take a while getting used to, isn't it? The 20s still feels like it's the 1920s when you say the 20s. So we're definitely going to have to get used to that. Kind of an overarching piece that we saw from both a prediction from SonicWall and some others too is basically predicting the fact that it's challenging out there. There are continued expansion of attack vectors. You have your IoT devices, you have your apps, which we've talked about in a couple
remote
of examples
networks. Yes, all sorts of things.
Cloud presence was a common theme for attacks that we saw too. And really, this is an observation / prediction that securing your network presence, securing all your data as an organization and as an individual is just going to continue to be a major challenge out there.
Yeah, so this front line of this battlefield is definitely shifting towards the fringes, but that's where the new technology is, and that's where the attackers are going to flock to. So seeing some interesting security announcements in the next 10 years.
Very much so. Anything else you wanted to hit on out of this group?
I've still not been to the moon.
Yeah, that one's an interesting one because it feels like the space situation has kind of ebbed and flowed quite a bit. And I think, if there had just been a straight move forward on space travel from the time
moon
that
to
we started,
here, yes,
we probably would have a little bit of space vacationing happening. I don't know.
Kind of took it easy the last 20 years.
Yeah. Even still, though, there is stuff out there. There are people who have already bought tickets for space tourism and things of that nature. And there's still, if you read stuff today, it's still saying we're only a couple of years away from a couple
be one of the
people.
first pilgrims on Mars.
Yeah. So there's definitely talk out there of that. We'll see.
Maybe in episode
happens.
312 in 2030, we'll report back on this.
Might as well. It's always worth checking on predictions because sometimes you'll be surprised in the positive, and sometimes you'll just get to laugh about them a little bit. And now it's time for headlines, our regular look at the latest in cybersecurity news and notes. Time for headline number 1. Tech chiefs plan to boost cybersecurity spending. The Wall Street Journal has a story that provides some promising follow-up to a few pieces we've shared previously on Ping, addressing organizational spending on cybersecurity. Andrew, we've shared some polls and anecdotal information that points to companies not prioritizing cybersecurity in the face of data showing how great a threat an online attack poses, up to and including closure. But what did we see in this piece?
So this piece looked at a handful of rather large companies. For example, Brown-Forman, the company that makes Jack Daniels, among some other large companies that you'd recognize. They are looking to increase their spending in 2020. It's a good sort of start to this new year to look at the trends and sort of get a touchstone for where the industry is headed.
Yeah, so the article notes, and again, some numbers that we've shared in the past kind of back this up. Gartner says average cybersecurity spending is 5 to 8% of the overall technology budget across industries, with manufacturing lagging at 2 to 4% and financial services ahead at 10 to 15%. But getting into a few more specifics, basically in this piece, the Wall Street Journal sends out a sort of cybersecurity questionnaire to a bunch of companies, and they got more than 30 responses to this questionnaire. So It's not scientific in the same way that some of these other ones are.
Not a huge sample size.
Yeah, not a huge sample size, and it's not really breaking down like percentages and things of that nature. But the article is sharing a number of different anecdotal pieces that suggest that spending is going up. So you mentioned Brown-Forman. Their CIO says they're planning to increase their budget by 8 to 10%, looking particularly into more data loss prevention software. There I go again. I said data earlier. Data. Same data thing, new year.
Right. And a lot of businesses, for example, like Brown-Forman, are finding themselves in charge of quite a lot of large data sets these days as they sort of build up their business intelligence networks. For example, the CIO, as you mentioned, said that he collects data from over 200 external information sources to use his business intelligence. And that, like you said, that means a lot of data protection is going to need to be invested in the coming years as that data sets grow larger and larger.
SurveyMonkey's CIO. This is a quote that doesn't really necessarily say much of anything, but he mentions that he can't foresee any company, especially his, would decrease its cybersecurity spending anytime soon. So it's not committing to an increase necessarily, but just
certainly not going back.
Yeah, not going back, and also sort of putting it out there that it doesn't make any sense to lower your commitment to security at this time.
It's a trend clearly going one direction. Companies in the survey specifically said they were looking for tools that provide real-time overviews of activity on their network, as well as deep analysis of risk, which I think are a great focus in 2020 and something that a lot of manufacturers are working very hard to address. Stuff like deep memory inspection, advanced threat protection, and all the different convenience pieces added to management dashboards. So a lot of manufacturers are finding this demand as well.
Yeah, the other company that's kind of highlighted in here is International Business Machines, which I had to do a double take on really quick.
IBM.
IBM.
Never seen it spelled out like that.
Yeah, it was not abbreviated in the piece at all. So it's like, I think this is IBM, but had to double check. So it is IBM, and IBM plans to boost its cybersecurity budget by double-digit percentage points, according to its CIO. You would think that IBM in particular probably has a pretty hefty cybersecurity budget already.
Very robust infrastructure, I'm sure. I wonder what the sort of long-term effects of this trends are going to look like. Is this going to be a year over year? And at some point, they're going to reach some sort of equilibrium where they're spending enough, but it's good to know that it's heading in that direction.
Yeah, and you'd also think that maybe just by putting this out into the universe, maybe some of these companies that were not considering raising their cybersecurity budgets, if they are interested in potentially following the leaders, this is a good way for them to do that. So Nothing bad here, all positive to see these companies at least prioritizing cybersecurity, and hopefully that trickles down to many others as well.
And some good news to start 2020.
Now, headline number 2. 3 things I taught 60,000 NASA employees about cybersecurity. The I in this case is technology guru, radio, podcast, TV personality Kim Commando, who shares a few insights she gained after talking cybersecurity with NASA employees. And basically, she covered 3 major topics in a keynote speech that she says are good for anyone to put into practice this year. And she stresses they are not rocket science.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out that she gave this keynote speech during National Cybersecurity Awareness Month back in October. So it's nice to hear that there are a lot of agencies actually taking this as a serious chance to revisit their cybersecurity game. Take a look at their network security chops.
Yep. It's one of those things that spreading this information a couple months later is a positive, because it shows that that's continuing the awareness side of things. So the 3 things that she stressed: number 1, securing your router. So that's something that kind of applies at home or at work. She calls the router the first line of defense for your network, reminding to change default passwords, which we've discussed before, keeping your firmware up to date, and of course, ensuring it's connected to a firewall. What was number 2?
Number 2 was, of course, to use a VPN. That's something we've talked about quite often here. So basically, all NASA employees traveling with a laptop for work would be required to connect back to the network with a VPN. Like I said, we've covered this quite extensively in past episodes, so I won't dive too deep into it, but always a good idea. A VPN cuts a lot of attacks out of the secure access space.
And encrypts your data as you're going back and forth with your business network. So it protects the business and protects you. And of course, even personally, if you're using a more public Wi-Fi connection or something, that gives you an extra layer of protection that you don't have if you do not have a VPN connection set up. So again, useful to consider. And number 3 is watching out for phishing scams. So keep phishing in mind for our next headline. But in this case, she reminds that phishing scams have gotten more and more sophisticated, often looking like they're coming from an official source, like a business you normally interact with. She gives an example of a Netflix type of email, but also could be a government agency. We've certainly heard, I guess in January, we can already start to say we're getting into tax season. IRS emails are certainly a problem with potential fakes there. And even in your own organization, you have people who are able to get in to do the more targeted spear phishing, things of that nature, where they make it look like you're getting an email from your boss or something. So those are all things to worry about, and still an incredibly common way in for attackers.
Right. Going back to the first point with the routers, she did bring up something that we've not touched on in any episodes that I remember, is the latest protocol for Wi-Fi protected access. So a lot of people with older routers will probably know the WPA protocol for protected access, but they should be up to the latest version, which is WPA3. That should be on most new models, and if not, at least WPA2 should be in place.
Yeah, it's one of those things you feel like once you get your Wi-Fi network up and running at home, then you don't really need to worry about it too much as long as it's working.
Yeah, I can't tell you how old my router is, so that might be something worth checking in. And I also, before reading this article, never considered the fact that the International Space Station could be hacked. Is that a James Bond movie yet?
If not, then we need to get on that script, but I don't know.
Daniel Craig.
I think he might be done after this one, so I don't know. Are you interested in starring as well?
I might take him up on the role.
All right. There was one other little addendum, too, that wasn't really part of the top 3, but included in this article. She also reminds home users to keep tabs on your personal Wi-Fi network. And that, of course, goes to network admins as well. You want to make sure that you know all of the devices that are connected so that no one is stealing your bandwidth or, even worse, stealing your personal information. So you got to keep that dashboard up and checking that periodically to make sure your neighbor is not stealing your Wi-Fi, or somebody parked out in front of your house isn't doing anything untoward with your wireless network.
Make sure you have a nice strong password protecting the network.
Yep. And now headline number 3. This is a 2-parter, the obligatory update on the latest ransomware attacks. And there's 2 that we're talking about here. 2 separate cases of ransomware attacks affecting major pieces of infrastructure in the U.S., a school system, and the military. So let's start with the school system first. The Richmond Community Schools District in Michigan extended its winter break by a few days, actually, to deal with the aftermath of a ransomware attack, which reportedly affected several of its servers. So
this might be the first ransomware attack that made someone other than the attackers happy. So,
yeah. Kids might not have been too angry about that, though their parents may have been.
Right. They were closed Thursday, Friday, the week after Christmas break ended. I personally remember waking up on winter mornings and going to watch the news and see if my school was closed for snow, but kids nowadays are, I guess, holding their breath to see if ransomware is taking down the school.
Yeah, I don't know if that goes across the ticker or anything like that, but
2-hour delay for ransomware.
Exactly. But the attack led to issues with systems like heating, which seems mildly important in January in Michigan. Phones, also vaguely important for a school.
Right.
Printers, copiers, and other classroom technology. So they took those extra couple of days to also have the weekend as well to hopefully get everything back up and running.
Officials from the school district did insist that private information for students, parents, and staff was not accessible by the hackers. This is because all of that information was not actually kept on this network at the school, but instead housed at the county level.
Right. So that's positive. It's good that they have kind of a different system for that, but probably should have that backed up in a couple of places too.
Yeah, maybe a couple counties.
Yeah. This story, though, kind of made me think of our Hildecrypt episode with Sonic Wall's Brooke Chelmo, because he mentioned that Hildecrypt has kind of a code of ethics where they would not attack schools with their ransomware. So obviously not everybody follows.
Right. We know who not to point the finger at. So.
Right. Because somebody went after a school system and caused a whole boatload of problems here. We don't typically talk as much about schools getting hit, but they're certainly vulnerable. We don't know, at least nothing that I saw, I don't know if you saw anything, indicated exactly how this particular ransomware attack was successful.
Yeah, I did not see a strain mentioned or any talk of ransoms being offered or sold or used. So,
But there are plenty of attack vectors for schools. I guess the positive in this case is that it seemed to have occurred over the Christmas break. So if it only costs them 2 days of school as opposed to probably a week or two that they wouldn't have planned on had it happened when they were in regular session, that's a positive.
And that's something administrators should keep in mind every holiday season, is that attacks like this do kind of surge during Christmas break and Thanksgiving break because attackers know that there's less people on hand to deal with it or notice the problem in the first place.
Yeah, so it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's something you still have to keep your eyes on and keep somebody paying close attention to your network at all times so that something doesn't slip through and have a chance to really multiply quickly if you're not actually
watch,
paying close attention. Yeah. So we don't know exactly how this particular school system got infected, what the attack vector was, but we do know, according to the U.S. Coast Guard, how they were affected by a ransomware attack. Also, again, over this holiday season time frame. So that's the U.S. Coast Guard is the military side of the attack story. They revealed an operational disruption occurred at a Maritime Transportation Security Act facility, which you can translate in common English to a Coast Guard station, in December. The culprit was actually an old friend of ours mentioned in our previous episode, the Ryuk ransomware.
Yes, and initially got onto your network by an employee clicking a malicious link embedded in email. So as we said in that last story, keep phishing in mind. This is exactly what happened here. A lot of high-level systems were compromised and affected by the outage, such as disruption of camera systems, physical access control systems, as well as loss of critical process control monitoring capabilities. So basically this port facility was shut down for over 30 hours because of this attack.
Yeah, and the kind of ironic that fishing and Coast Guard come together there. But the Coast Guard didn't reveal exactly where this specific facility is, but the information came out in a warning issued broadly, not only to let people know that this occurred, but to remind everyone else to pay attention to their cybersecurity situations, to hopefully not have others affected by similar ransomware.
Yeah, I imagine a transportation hub like this presents special challenges as you got basically a lot of third parties coming in that you can't exactly verify their cybersecurity posture. So you kind of have to prepare for it the best as you can on your end and, urge them to do their part.
Yeah, the Coast Guard actually back in July of 2019 issued a similar marine safety alert urging vessel and facility owners and operators to improve baseline cybersecurity following an attack on an actual vessel called a deep draft vessel in this particular alert, which was bound for the port of New York and New Jersey. So there's one of your third parties that you're talking about.
It's a sort of quit tracking your mud into our house announcement.
Yeah, and this time the mud came from inside. So One other thing that was notable, I thought, about Ryuk ransomware that I don't know if we mentioned in our previous episode. To make matters worse, apparently the Ryuk ransomware attacks it's recently been discovered that the decryptor for this strain of ransomware has a bug as well that could lead to data loss in large files. So even if you get that decryptor, you may not be out of the woods with it. So again, have everything backed up all over the place, keep it safe. And I think the Coast Guard may need Kim Commando training or something to
get the NASA boys in there to help out. Experts have been warning about port facilities becoming a target for ransomware. These are large transportation and trading hubs, so that can cause quite a bit of damage if operations are suspended. A Singapore-based cybersecurity project called the Cyber Risk Management Team warned that a ransomware campaign targeting Asia's ports could cost the global economy over $100 billion. So quite a lot at stake there.
You just think of how much is computerized at this point in regards to ports and everything.
Mm-hmm.
You wonder what that 30 hours cost, really, even for the Coast Guard station. Probably not so much in terms of commerce, but could it have affected their ability to rescue somebody, just patrols, things of that nature?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows exactly what was affected there, but all a little bit disturbing to think about. So,
and I think these two stories pair up well to sort of show that ransomware is basically indiscriminate. They're attacking larger businesses, small businesses, military, government institutions, anything they can land on, they're gonna aim for. At Firewalls.com, we're fortunate enough to have a team of certified network engineers who offers a variety of services for top security brands like firewall configurations, endpoint deployment, and expert support, to name a few.
And I did say that I was going to do that first paragraph, so I apologize there. In our Engineer's Minute, one of our experts takes a moment each episode to provide a tip or answer a question. That's where you come in, leave a question in the comments, or email us at podcast@firewalls.com, and you just may get your question answered in a future episode. On this edition, our engineer Gerald has a tip to ensure your network security gets off to a good start this new year.
Well, guys, it's that time of year again where you should be going through doing a health check on your firewall. Now, me personally, I would suggest doing this about twice a year for two reasons. One being, if you do this once a year, when that time comes, there may be so many changes for you to make in terms of maintaining your security, the average person wouldn't know where to begin. The second reason is to make sure we're removing anything that could potentially become a threat to our network as soon as possible. What all does this health check consist of? Well, I'm glad you asked. When we go through the firewalls, we like to ensure that the firewall security features are being utilized and that the firewall is using the most secure encryption methods known to man at that time. In addition to those things, we also clean up the configuration to make it easier to understand for the end user, correct vulnerability issues, and so much more. We even provide you with a detailed report of our findings so that you can see for yourself how valuable these things are. Here at Firewalls.com, we have a team dedicated to performing health checks. We do hundreds of them a day, and let me tell you, these guys don't eat or sleep until the check is complete. So before I end, let me ask you this question. Have you done your health check? If the answer is no, give us a call. We'll be more than happy to get this done for you.
To learn more about what our network engineers can do for your business, give us a call at 866-403-5305 or go to firewalls.com/services.
And thanks very much for joining us for this episode of Ping, a Firewalls.com podcast. Subscribe or follow now to ensure you get the latest episodes as soon as they're available. And please do rate and review us wherever you listen to the podcast. Visit Firewalls.com for all your network security needs and give us a follow on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. For Andrew Harmon, I'm Kevin Baxter. We'll be back soon with another episode. But in the meantime, we remind you to get secure,
Stay secure.